Westcourt is the final overworld before the end boss on Earth, and is a mandatory section during the campaign. Just like the other overworlds, there are a couple of side areas to explore, aside from the main boss arena. It can be good to know that it is possible to defeat the world boss before completing the side areas. You can always come back for the optional stuff later. With that said, I prefer to wrap up each world with the corresponding world boss, so I went for completing the side missions first. If devils were the most common enemy in the previous overworld, then shrikes are the most prevalent foes in Westcourt. They are humanoid-looking enemies with a semi-automatic weapon that can deal significant damage. Their aim luckily tends to be of the poorer sort, often missing most of their shots on mid to long range. However, if you get caught inside a building with one, they can wreck you in just a few hits, before you even have time to retaliate or heal. They are somewhat cunning and often move around to try and establish a more favorable fighting position for them. Whether that results in a better firing angle against you or an object to take cover behind, they can be quite annoying to deal with. Getting caught out of cover with a couple of shrikes pointing their guns at you is a sure recipe for returning to the mud. The good thing is they have quite a small health pool, and their head is a weak spot. This allows you to make quick work of them, preferably with a powerful ranged weapon such as the sniper rifle. You'll see me in the beginning trying to use the sniper rifle to pick the shrikes off from a distance. The next special enemy I encountered was the Rotwitch. The Rotwitch is an interesting enemy. Opposite of most enemies, it remains rather immobile at range and uses its special powers to attack the player. It has two main attack patterns. The first one is that it summons a rot cloud at the player's position. This is choreographed by the Rotwitch standing up on its legs and raising both arms in the air, followed by a brief flashing red light. Immediately afterwards, a rot cloud explodes at the player's last known position, dealing direct damage and leaving behind a small area that deals rot damage over time. To prevent yourself from getting caught in the explosion, the easiest countermeasure is to start running as soon as the Rotwitch begins to chant, and keep running until you hear the explosion behind you. You can also wait until the very last moment and perform a directional dodge to avoid it if you want to prioritize dealing damage. The second attack is a bit harder to predict. It is a much less coordinated attack where the Rotwitch quickly raises the staff and fires a red orb in a straight path towards you. Luckily, the orb travels relatively slow, and since you're almost always fighting this creature at a range, you can dodge it by running to either side of the orb's traveling path. The weak spot seems to be the head, as is common for many root enemies. However, I noticed I'm often unable to deal weak spot damage despite clearly hitting the head. It could be that it is only susceptible to weak spot damage while it is summoning the rot cloud, or that the weak spot is localized to a very small area. In any case, I usually just shoot it in the head and keep shooting until it is dead. That seems to work well enough. Since you're bound anyway to search each area for rare items and equipment pieces, you might as well destroy every breakable you see and get some freebies while doing so. After a while, you easily get into a nice rhythm of it. Going back outside, I saw that there was a Tome of Knowledge in the far left corner, when I was scoped in and taking down the shrike posted there. Afterwards, I engaged the Rotwitch. There were some complications during this fight in the form of additional shrikes, but they were easily managed in between the Rotwitch's attacks. In hindsight, I was also a bit lucky that only one of their shots hit me, or else I would have been deceased. After dealing with the Rotwitch, it was time to enter the first side dungeon in Westcourt, namely the Tangled Pass. I dealt with a couple of extra shrikes, picked up the Tome of Knowledge I spotted earlier, and then went straight for the dungeon. Feel free if you would like to skip ahead to 558 in the video, as this is when I enter the dungeon for the first time. The Tangled Pass dungeon follows a simple layout with a few 90-degree bends from start to finish and some small side areas where you may find some loot. As far as enemy encounters went in my playthrough, I saw mostly hollows, rotwarts and the occasional Tumbler, which is an elite enemy that looks like a larger version of the regular hollow that can roll into a ball and charge at you. You'll see one in the video soon enough. Most of these enemies could be managed with relative ease, however I did die once to a rotwart coming up from behind through a bush and almost died to a Tumbler on my second run through the dungeon. Since there would be multiple enemy encounters and tighter quarters in this dungeon, I swapped back to the trusted hunting rifle as my weapon of choice. It was in this dungeon that I found my first Simulacrum of the playthrough. Each realm has one Simulacrum that you can find. On the Apocalypse difficulty setting, there is also a chance that bosses may randomly drop a Simulacrum. This is the rarest material in the game and it has two main purposes. 1. After saving the Root Mother, she will be back in Ward 13. If you give her Simulacrum, she will upgrade your Dragonheart, providing you with additional charges, up to a maximum of 10 charges. And 2. Being used to upgrade any equipment to its maximum level. Due to its rarity, it would take either a great deal of farming in the adventure mode setting or many campaign runs to obtain enough Simulacrum to be able to fully upgrade all equipment. Not to mention that the more times you play through the game, the more weapons and armor sets you will find. Finally, certain bosses will also grant different rewards depending on how you beat them. All in all, this means you really ought to think about where to best spend your hard-earned Simulacrum. At the start of a new playthrough, the choice is quite simple. Unless you want to make it more challenging for yourself, the Simulacrum should go towards upgrading your Dragonhearts. This is logical since at this point you are nowhere close to maxing out any equipment, and acquiring additional Dragonheart chargers will greatly improve your survivability. The only reason I could imagine for someone to not spend their Simulacrum is if they are playing solo on lower difficulty levels where they may not need to heal that often, or if they are supremely confident in their skills and wish to save all Simulacrum for later playthroughs, to max out certain equipment pieces or weapons. If you play cooperatively, having additional Dragonheart charges is even more important, as these are consumed not only when healing yourself, but also when reviving downed allies. Another new elite was the Shaman, which looks very similar to the Rot Witch. It is also mostly hunched over on the ground, wielding a staff and firing red orbs towards you. The main difference is that instead of summoning rot clouds, it summons hollows, and can also grant them a flicker cloak type shield that you have to wear down before you can damage them. Other than that, it's mostly the same strategy to beat it as for the Rot Witch. Whenever it spawns any hollows, prioritize taking them down first. Run or dodge to the sides to avoid the red orb, aim for the head, and the enemy will be dead. I will fight one of them in a couple of minutes, but before that I should say a few words about another item I discovered in this dungeon. It was in a side area that I finally found a ring that would come to be used extensively throughout the campaign. Interestingly, it is not a ring I would ever use on a higher level character, but it carried me through more or less the entire game for a lack of any better option. This ring increases the evade window moderately and evade speed by 10%. Overall, it was a good choice for most boss fights, as it provided a bit more leniency to the dodge timings and thus increased overall survivability in those fights where one hit would immediately have felled me. On a whole, the loot from Earth was nowhere near the top level you would desire for an Apocalypse playthrough. Personally, I would have preferred to find the Gunslinger's Charm necklace and the Heartseeker ring, which can both be found on Earth. The Gunslinger's Charm increases the fire rate by 15% and reload speed by 20%, which is incredibly powerful for weapons like the hunting rifle that reloads one bullet at a time. Heartseeker is a very powerful ring, which grants the wearer guaranteed critical hits on non-alerted enemies, and on top of that also provides a 20% increased critical hit damage. So while wearing this ring, you will essentially be initiating most ranged engagements with a critical hit that also deals 20% more damage than usual, thus effectively turning every regular mob into minced meat and also saving you ammunition. And against specials that are likely to survive a couple of hits, you will retain that 20% critical damage bonus throughout the engagement for every hit. That is why I would have loved to get those two items. But alas, you have to make do with what you are given. And so I was happy to use the Ring of Evasion. Making my way through the rest of the dungeon was not too challenging, and coming out on the other side was the Artery, which led to the Mangler boss fight. Mangler is a bigger version of the Tumbler enemy, and my tactic for this fight was the following. Sniper rifle for high alpha damage and guaranteed fire damage over time. Just like Gorefist, Mangler also had the regenerator trait, so I wanted to apply the burning status effect as much as possible to negate the boss's self-healing. Cultist armor set for longer weapon modded duration and faster build-up, also because the boss and its minions doesn't have any weak spots. Focus fire on Mangler when it's above ground. Try to walk or run around the hollows as much as possible instead of dodging, as this preserves stamina. Focus fire on Mangler when it's above ground. Try to walk or run around the hollows as much as possible instead of dodging, as this preserves stamina. When Mangler rolls towards you, get close to a wall, so it rolls into it and you can shoot it while it recovers. Bear in mind that Mangler will also stop briefly if it rolls into a hollow, so you can use the hollows to your advantage by positioning them between you and the boss. It can be good to know that the boss immediately replaces any hollows that are killed, so I only shoot hollows when needed, either to prevent incoming damage or to build weapon mod power. For the second phase, I try to keep Mangler in front of me at all times, because it has a huge leap attack that can close a large distance very quickly if you have your back turned against it. From my experience, I have had most success fighting the second phase Mangler around the tree area, as you can use the trees to your advantage when kiting the boss, and it prevents the big leap attack from hitting you. These trees are also close enough to the walls of the arena that the boss is likely to roll into them. So you can simply dodge the boss and hollows while taking your opportunities to damage the boss whenever it resurfaces, and especially after it hits a wall. Now it is time to face this oversized tumbleweed and see who the real boss is. The last advice I would give is to put bandages on your quickbar, as the boss attacks may inflict the bleeding status effect. I died during my first attempt, so if you want to skip the boss intro cutscene and jump straight into the winning attempt, you can go to 15:05 in the video, or you could let it play and watch me get churned to pieces by an oversized meatball. After the boss fight, I exited the arena and picked up the loot box outside to the right, and then ran around exploring the rest of the overworld without finding anything of interest. After that, I went into one of the 2 remaining exits and discovered the Ash Yard, which was the boss arena for one of the 2 final bosses you can get on Earth. This meant I was going to be fighting Singe, the dragon boss. But before this, I wanted to clear out the last side dungeon, so I went back for that first. On the way there I found the settlement, which features a few resting places, a couple of loot boxes, some breakables and a checkpoint. From this position I chose to take the southern path first, which led to Singe's arena. Immediately eastwards was the actual side dungeon. Just like in previous parts of this playthrough, the path there was full of common enemies, but there was nothing exceptionally exciting to find combat or equipment wise. So feel free to go to 2710 in the video if you would like to skip the exploration parts. The final side dungeon on Earth for this playthrough was the Gallows, which is coupled to the Root Shrine event. The Root Shrine event is quite rare for me to see. I had only ever gotten it a couple of times before across several hundred hours of playtime, so it was surprising to see it pop up randomly during this run. The fight is of an onslaught nature, where you are assaulted by an array of different enemies. It starts simple enough with some regular type enemies, but quickly becomes more challenging as multiple elite type enemies are spawned simultaneously on top of the regular enemies. The most difficult part of the fight for me was to deal with the Juggernaut, as there was seldom any good way to position myself in the arena to ensure a consistent damage output while also being safe from its counter damage. And if I used the Hotshot mod for higher damage against the Juggernaut, I would have to keep dodging the Flame Devils, as I would not be able to deal any damage to them with the Hotshot mod active. On the other hand, if I took the Flame Devils down first, there would be additional enemies spawned that would be more difficult to kite around while dealing with the Juggernaut, such as the Tumbler or the Stalker. That would mean certain death for me for sure, as there is no way I would feel confident enough to deal with a Juggernaut and a Tumbler or a Stalker at the same time. The best advice I can give is to learn the wave patterns to know which waves spawn which enemies and to make sure to keep the quote-unquote easier enemies alive when the more difficult enemies are spawned. Also, knowing which direction most enemies will spawn or approach from is critical. During my first attempt, the Mangler combined with the Juggernaut pushed me back towards the entrance, and when I was finished taking it down, the Flame Devil had come upon me instead. I tried rolling past it to the left, since I knew I would be stuck on the concrete blocks if I went the other way, but then the Juggernaut had an angle on me instead. On top of this, my hunting rifle had 0 ammunition left. In acceptance of my defeat, I decided to go out on my own terms, with one last act of defiance, and punched the Flame Devil in its face. For positioning, I think both ends of the arena work quite well, as most enemies spawn on either side of the arena, giving you the largest spaces and the most time to pick them off before they reach you. In my experience, this makes the first waves very manageable, until the Juggernaut appears, at which point you are forced to start kiting around the arena while staying in cover from their returning fire. Trust me, you don't want to face the Juggernaut in an open corridor without any cover. I cannot say that my winning attempt was pain-free, as I ended up having to use all my Dragon Hearts and a Blood Vial to survive. But a win is a win, and after enough tries, you tend to give up the notion of getting a perfect run in favor of just getting it done. That way, you can move on with the story after all, so it is what it is, as I often say. After completing the event, I crafted the Twisted set, which I used on and off during the campaign. Interestingly, this is the only set in the game to feature two separate headpieces, the Twisted Mask and the Twisted Hood. Since I had already gotten the Twisted Mask from the Mad Merchant, I would not have to craft the Twisted Hood at the Root Shrine to obtain the full set bonus, but I did it anyway because I had enough material, and because it was highly unlikely that I would come back to the altar later on during the playthrough. The set provides slow but consistent health regeneration, as well as a up to 30% increase in weapon mod damage at full HP. The permanent health regeneration is a boon while exploring, as you won't need to spend Dragon Hearts or Blood Words to heal chip damage, and the set bonus is a big boost to all damage dealing weapon mods. I paid a quick visit to Ward 13 to upgrade my Dragon Heart with an extra charge, and to do the first big consumable stock up. I also purchased the Seed Collar weapon mod and upgraded the coach gun and the submachine gun. I wanted to upgrade more equipment to match my average gear score at level 2, but I did not have enough scrap to do so. In preparation for the upcoming boss fight, I purchased the Seed Collar mod. Considering that the other few weapon mods I had were all defensive focused and that the Hotshot mod would be effectively useless against the Fire Dragon and its adds, I wanted another offensive weapon mod for the fight. The Seed Collar weapon mod allows you to summon up to 2 hollows simultaneously. They will scramble about and try to attack any nearby threats and expire after 30 seconds or if they take enough damage. I figured they would likely not make a huge impact in terms of boss damage, but something is better than nothing, and besides hurting the boss, they might be better at serving as distractions against it and the Flame Devils. In my experience, it is not possible to maintain an average gear score across multiple weapons and armor sets, so it is important to pick your upgrades wisely, unless you are not opposed to spending hours grinding scraps and upgrading materials in adventure mode. At most, you could perhaps keep 2 armor sets and weapons upgraded at the same time, but even then you might want to save some materials for later worlds, as you could potentially find more suitable equipment there. My general rule is to only upgrade if you're seriously stuck on a boss and you think it will help you beat it, or if you enter a new section or world and realize that your damage output and armor values are severely underrated compared to your adversaries. During my first ever playthrough, I remember there were many times where I reverted to a previous weapons and armor set combo simply because I did not have enough damage or defense using any of the newer equipment I had picked up, even though the newer equipment fit my playstyle much better. This was about as far as I made it during my first session of playing this new character. The next session started with me grabbing the Ash Yard checkpoint, so I could fast travel there back from the ward. After changing my weapon mods and armor, I made my way through the teleporter and went on to fight the greatest adversary yet. I would say out of all world bosses, Singe is one of the easier encounters. Compared to the Ent, which is the other world boss you may get on Earth, Singe's adds are more manageable and its main attacks are easier to dodge. Again, since fire damage is not effective against Singe, I swapped out the Hotshot mod with the Seed Collar mod, and swapped the Hunter's Mark from the repeater pistol to my hunting rifle. My tactic was to constantly have 2 hollows summoned that could aid me in the fight, either by trying to attack Singe or by relieving me of some pressure from the Flame Devils that Singe spawns. I think the easiest way to deal with this boss is to run around the edges of the arena and take shots at it from a distance. As long as you stay in motion and avoid the burning oil pools on the floor, the boss's fireball attacks will not be able to reach you. Circling the arena is a great way to maintain some distance to the boss, but due to its movements and other factors, there may be times where you end up close enough so that it will try to blast you with its flame breath attack. In this case, your best bet is to run in the opposite direction of where the breath started from. The range of this attack is deceptively long and covers a broad area, but as long as you are aware of this, it is simple to stay out of its range. In the beginning of the fight, there are a few old burnt out cars and ruined buildings in the arena. These can be used to block the fireball attacks, but beware that they will break after getting hit, so they are a one-time use only. If you manage to get a Flame Devil in between you and the boss, they will also absorb the flame ball attack, thus protecting you from damage. When it comes to weak spot damage, the chest is the target. While Singe is in its default position with all 4 legs on the ground, this part can only be hit at certain angles and while crouching. But when Singe stands up on its hind legs, it exposes its chest, and that is the moment you should try to capitalize on. Dealing enough damage during this animation makes Singe staggered, which has the added benefit of rendering it unable to perform its flying flame charge attack. Despite these simple mechanics, I did lose my first battle due to a misjudgment of the fireball attack. Typically, Singe only does 2 back-to-back fireballs, so I thought I'd use the opening after the attacks to fill up on ammunition and use my Hunter's Mark ability. But it turned out that Singe had other plans and dished out a quadruple fireball attack instead. And so I perished, then I respawned and went immediately in for round 2, which was the winning attempt. The fight was very long and tedious due to the large health pool that Singe has. It should also be said that my weapons were perhaps not upgraded to an appropriate level for dealing adequate damage. But as mentioned previously, it was simple enough to overcome the fight by sticking to the basic movement and engagement pattern tactics. It just took a long time. Lastly, I would like to mention that some bosses provide alternative loot depending on how you beat them. In Singe's case, you could focus on damaging its tail and eventually break the tail towards the end of the fight. If you then succeed to beat the boss without its tail, you obtain the Dragonling's item, which can be used to craft Smolder. Smolder is a melee weapon that deals fire damage, and charge attacks apply the burning status effect to enemies. It features the same moveset as the Scrap Sword, which is the Hunter class starting melee weapon. If you instead beat the boss normally without breaking its tail, you obtain the Blazing Heart, which can be used to craft the Spitfire sidearm. Spitfire is an automatic pistol that deals fire damage and comes equipped with a non-removable flamethrower weapon mod. This mod functions just as the name suggests it would, by spewing out flames. The range is rather limited, but its effectiveness cannot be denied, and it is a superb crowd control tool. Just like Smolder's charged attacks, the flamethrower mod also applies the burning status effect on enemies, but its regular bullets do not. It can be good to know that the flames linger for a brief moment on the ground before dissipating, and anything walking through the flames will be set on fire, including yourself. I went for the normal kill, as I figured I could make better use of the Spitfire than Smolder, especially considering I had already invested some scraps and upgrading materials into obtaining the full Twisted Armour set. There's really not much else to say about this fight, so if you'd like to skip ahead right to the end of it, you can go to 5434. So after approximately 11.5 minutes, and after consuming no less than 6 additional ammo boxes, Singe was finally bested by the repeater pistol. Defeating the world boss on Earth rewards the player with the Quick Hands trait, which increases the reload speed by 1.25% per rank up to a maximum of 25%. This is a very powerful trait because it decreases downtime between reloads. It is effective for weapons with smaller magazine sizes or weapons that reload individual bullets or shells. Upgrading this trait could mean the difference between coming out of a roll with your weapon empty or it being fully reloaded. Coming out of the arena, it was finally time to visit the Labyrinth, as a great tower appeared in the middle of the city. Stepping on the circular pad at the base of the tower warps you to where the keeper of the labyrinth resides. After a short dialogue, this godlike creature teleports you into the labyrinth and the keeper's blessing trait is obtained. This trait reduces elemental damage taken by 0.5% per rank, up to a maximum of 10%. Inside the labyrinth, there are 3 possible directions to pursue: left, right, and forward. Following any of these paths eventually leads to a portal to a new realm, but without the item known as the labyrinth key, it is not possible to activate the dormant portals on the left and the right hand paths. Thus the path was straightforward, up the stairs and into the only portal that was already active. Dress lightly and bring your favorite snacks and beverages, for next up is the desert wasteland of Rom, with its endless sand dunes perpetually subjected to the unrelenting sun. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel to see more videos of similar content. If you already are a subscriber, I would like to thank you so much for your support and for making it to the end of the video. Now I would like to wish you all a good day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.